When I was 10 years old, we woke to the news one day that my brother had been really brutally murdered. And it really shook our whole family to the core. I remember being young and just so confused of like what's happening. When you're in a big family, you think you're invincible. And I'm the youngest of 11, so we had this sense of like, we're in this together and we're secure in our own little world. But when my brother was killed in this drug scene in a town in New South Wales, it was a big thing. And I remember my father losing it, collapsing, being on the floor. And I remember taking down all the photos in the house of my brother because he couldn't look at him because it was just he would break down every time he would see his face. And he was the brother that everyone really loved. He was the popular one and the one all the girls loved, and he was such a special person. And to lose him so brutally was really hard. And I remember it was quite a big story at the time in the news, and the news crews came to my house, and one of the comment from my parents, because the man who killed my brother was on the run. I knew who it was, but he was running away. And so the news crews asked my father, "What would you like to say to the man who killed your son?" And that's kind of like a really intrusive question, and something that you wouldn't imagine answering like very politely. But my father, who had some touch of God, he had some background of like being touched by God in some way. I wouldn't say he was following Jesus strongly, but he had something of God's grace in his life. And he looked at the cameras and he said, "I want to tell the man that I forgive him, and then if he would turn himself in, that God would have a chance to change his life." And everyone was so shocked, as you can imagine, at the response from my father. And it didn't make it any easier, but forgiveness kind of became part of the soil of my heart and our family's story at that moment. And that was great. We still had to deal with the pain of the loss of my brother. And I remember many years later, my sister, who was a social worker and a beautiful person, was at a conference. And then a man came up to her and asked her, "Are you Stephen Kennedy's sister?" That's the name of my brother who died. And she said, "Yes, I am." And he told her that he was the warden in the jail looking after my brother while he was in prison before he was murdered. And in that time, he is a Christian, and was sharing his faith with my brother. They started reading the Bible together regularly, and he had prayed with my brother and led him to faith. We didn't know that. So we all cried together as the recognition of my brother had faith in Jesus, and his life was beginning to turn around before he was killed. He said that's not the end of the story though. The most amazing part of this story is, he said, "And now I'm also the warden for the man who killed your brother." And I want to tell you that I've been sharing Jesus with him as well. We've been reading the Bible together, and he has also now committed his faith and committed his life to following Jesus as well. And we all just cried together in recognition of that only God could take something so broken and turn it into a story of redemption and hope and possibility for the future. And I think back to my father, that his forgiveness opened even the possibility for that story to happen, for something to change. It was his forgiveness that allowed the space for healing, allowed the space for some kind of reconciliation, and God just did a miracle in our family through that one act of forgiveness.